Dr. Joseph F. Hare, Jr. is Executive Director of the DBA program and Professor at Kennesaw State University. A former past President of the Academy, he currently serves as the Co-Chair of the Board of Governors and as a Distinguished Fellow.
Welcome, Joe. We've been friends and colleagues for a long time, and it's really a pleasure to interview you here today and gain some insights on your career development, your career success, and your many insights that you have for future marketing leaders. And the first question is fairly simple. What spurred your interest in the marketing discipline?
Well, I've always been interested in marketing and sales, and even from my early days I started my career in marketing like perhaps many kids do in grade school, selling magazines. And then I had a number of other jobs selling and marketing. And for example, when I was in high school, I sold women's shoes on weekends and learned about incentives and made extra money because it was all based on the number of shoes that you sold. And so I've been a true marketer throughout. And then I went on to college, and I'm really not sure why I didn't study marketing initially at the undergraduate level, but I chose economics, and I also was studying a lot of psychology, which maybe stimulated a little bit of my interest in marketing, but I still did not major in marketing. And I got my degree at the bachelor's level and started looking for jobs. And I couldn't find a good job. At least I didn't think I could find a good job. I did want to make quite a bit of money for those days. Interestingly enough, my goal was to make a job where I could earn $1,000 a month. And so certainly things have changed quite a bit since then. But there were no jobs that I felt like were a good match with my interest and skills. And so I decided to go back and get a master's degree, and I am sure that I reflected more at that point on what I was going to pursue than I had initially. So I thought about the courses that I'd enjoyed, and of course I enjoyed psychology. And it also turned out that I'd taken one course in marketing, salesmanship, and I really enjoyed that. And so I said, well, you know, perhaps I should get a master's degree in marketing, and then there'd be some good jobs available. And so I finished that degree, or got near the end of that degree, and I did find a job. I had a good job as a sales representative for the Xerox company, and was really ready to take that job. And the chair of the marketing department at the University of Florida, which is where I'd got my first 2 degrees, came to me and said, how would you like to get your doctorate? And I said, well, I don't know, I really never thought about it. And he said something like, well, I think that you would be good. And by the way, we have full funding for you. And so full funding, the definition of that was they were going to pay for me to get a doctorate degree, and I wasn't going to be required to teach or to do research, simply to take the program and complete the courses. And the only requirement was that I needed to major in marketing. And at that point I was single, and there were lots of attractive women at the University of Florida, and school was fun. And I thought work would be fun, but I thought school would probably be even more fun. And so I decided to go back to school and get the doctorate. And of course, we also had a good football team at the University of Florida back then as well. So that's how I ended up in marketing, and that's how I ended up in the doctoral program, and eventually got my degree and took my first job as an assistant professor at the University of Mississippi.
Joe, it was interesting to hear about how you got started in marketing at the University of Florida and the support you got there for moving through the different stages of your undergraduate, master's, and then your PhD. You've had an incredible career and will continue to have a great career, but at this point, what would you say that you're most proud of in your career?
As teachers, I think it's logical to say that we're proud of our students. We're proud of the undergraduates we taught. Even though they're never interested in learning, they're just interested in making grades. And we're proud of the master students because they're a little more mature, and they are able to bring insights into the classroom, and you're able to observe their success probably more because you maintain closer contact with them. But we're particularly proud of our doctoral students because we spend just lots of time with them for the 3 or the 4 years that they're in the program. And then we very often spend a lot of time with them for many years thereafter. And we're able to observe their success in their publishing and in their teaching and in their careers and in their family endeavors. And so observing the successes and sometimes the struggles of students is a very rewarding component of being a professor. But above and beyond that, for me personally, I'm proud of the fact that I've stayed involved, and I hope people think that I've contributed for more than 40 years in this career. I've been in teaching and researching and writing books and going to conferences, and I guess I'm sort of a staple there. And when I reflect on the group of people that were my contemporaries when I started out, including yourself, OC, I think of the fact that we were all young and we were enthusiastic and naive and wanted to make marketing better, and I really think that we did a lot of things. But 6, 7, 8 years later, when you looked around you, many of the people that started out on that journey were no longer around. They weren't coming to conferences. Some of them were still publishing, but there were a lot fewer than started out with us. And of course, the longer we are around, the fewer people that we see. And you're one of the 1 or 2 or 3 people that I know that started out, and so I commend you for hanging in there as well. But it's not really hanging in there. It really is fun. And so the ability and the opportunity to contribute and work with students and work with faculty and be involved in the community has been really something that I'm very proud of. And I hope and strongly encourage that the young people that I work with and have worked with, encourage them to follow in a similar path. I know that 40 plus years is a long time, but if you change the kinds of things that you do or evolve as an individual, then I think it helps to keep you motivated. For example, the first 10 years of my career, I invested in learning how to publish in journals, at least most of it, because the University of Florida, when I got my degree there, none of my professors had ever published in a journal, and they didn't teach us how to write, and they didn't tell us we were going to have to write. And then I got my degree, and I got out there ready to set the world on fire, and I didn't have those skills. So I had to learn them, and that's really what I did much of the first 10 years. And then the second 10 years, I went to Louisiana State University, and I became an administrator, and I chaired the marketing department. And that was a lot of fun as well. It was a little risky because some of my colleagues and friends said, why would you go to Louisiana State University as chair of the department? Because they've had like 5 chairs in the last 5 years. And I, was a little cocky, and I said, well, that doesn't worry me. I'm quite confident I can handle that situation. And I, in fact, did go there and stay there. I was chair of the marketing department for 19 years. And so that was what I was involved in for many years. But then the third 10 years or so in this span of years, I became much more involved in the business community, consulting, writing some more books, and doing some other things that were a little bit different than I'd done previously, and they kept me motivated. I was involved in scholarly and professional associations, and was able to contribute there and continue to work with students and to do some consulting. And then hopefully it's not the twilight of my career, but the last 10 years or so of my career, I made a major move. I left a Research One University, LSU, and went to Kennesaw State. And I thought I was just going to be a teacher, and they needed a doctoral program. And so, of course, again, I said, well, I'll help you prepare and plan and develop one. And I always loved teaching doctoral students, and so I created a doctoral program for what had, less than 10 years ago been a junior college, and then a university, and then a master's university, and now put together the doctorate in business administration, not just in marketing, but for the entire College of Business. And the last couple of years, I've had the honor and the privilege to initiate that program and enjoy a lot of success and continued success in some of the things that really bring joy to your life.
Joe, you've had a fascinating journey through your marketing career, and everything you're telling us is extremely interesting. But what do you think contributed the most to your career success?
Well, one of the obvious things that we can say helps you to be successful is your work ethic. You don't have to work long hours, not every day, but you do have to work consistently. And you have to put in quality work at quality time. But that's sort of a general statement of the kinds of things that make people successful. I think that there are some things that are a little more unique about my particular situation that have contributed, but even though they're unique about my situation, I think that they can be transferred to other individuals, and that they can adapt them in a way that would be helpful to them as well. Of course, one of the things that I've been very fortunate to have is a supportive family and a wife that's made it really easy for me to at least attempt to balance the life-work relationship, and to be successful in family as well as successful in career and feel personally successful. But some specific things about career and some career things is that I recognized early on, and I continued to, I think, leverage this throughout my career, and that's the value of networking and being involved in associations and finding people that I could work with, and finding ways to help them, but to also have them help me. So I think networking and involvement in associations like the Academy of Marketing Science, where I've gotten to know people, and I've gotten to know people who could help me as well as that I could help them, is certainly helpful as well. Another thing that I think is a really important factor is that, and I don't mean to be bragging too much, but I've thought that having a personality that is, approachable is something that's been very helpful to me. And so consistently over the years, I tried to go up to people and introduce myself and talk to them and make them feel important and make them feel like they had a contribution, but that I was interested in them and could work with them. And I would go up and share things with them and be very open and try to be helpful with them. So I think the idea of having a personality, even if you're a shy person, to try to be less shy and to try to get to know people and to learn what they have to bring to the table and to support and to stimulate those kinds of activities is very important, and has helped contribute to my ability to achieve many of the things that I have throughout my career.
Again, Joe, thanks for those insights. You've been involved with the Academy of Marketing Science in many different roles. What role has the Academy of Marketing Science played in your own academic success?
Well, I think some of the obvious things that have been available through the Academy are the conferences where we meet people, and the proceedings where we shared and published our ideas, and of course the Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science, where I've been able to publish some articles and my thoughts. So those are sort of the obvious things, but when I reflect on specifically in my particular situation, I really believe that what I've gained the most in the development of my career from the Academy is an opportunity to develop my leadership skills. I was asked to become involved as an officer, and I was fortunate enough to be elected. And I was elected to, one office and then another office, and eventually I became president of the organization, and I served my time, and I learned how to be a leader there and to manage my time. Then I went on to become chair of the Board of Governors, and so I've been involved with the Academy for probably 25, maybe 30 years, and I've just continuously had an opportunity to first learn to be an effective leader, but then to, over the years, acquire additional skills and to become an even better leader. And so I think that for individuals who want to develop their leadership skills as well as their scholarly skills, that the Academy really provides a super opportunity to achieve both of those goals in your life.
Joe, you've made many contributions to the field of marketing, especially in the area of research and methodology. What do you see as some of the emerging research issues or topics that people should address in the future?
Well, in my career, and particularly in the area of research, I really didn't pursue an approach that many people suggested, which is programmatic research. I had a lot of interest, and so I've published in consumer behavior, and I've published in sales and sales management, and I've published in marketing management. But if I reflect on the area that I've spent the most time researching, it's really in the area of methods. And so I think that's where my expertise is the greatest, and where I could suggest what I think will be the direction of research over the next few years and perhaps even the next decade. And that's really a single core area. But let's reflect back on the methods area for my career. And early in my career, when we just had available computers and software, we were learning about and applying new methods, multivariate methods. And we spent a lot of time just learning those methods and teaching those methods and applying them to new and different problems. And then in the 80s and the 90s, and even in the last 5 to 10 years, we spent a lot of time on measurement issues, because we realized that we were applying techniques, but we weren't thinking about data and data collection. And so we've learned a lot in terms of improving the measurement and developing constructs that enable us to improve the quality of our data. But even though the quality of our data and the focus has been on measurement, I think in the next 10 years or so, we're really going to refocus on quality, but we're going to refocus on quality of data in a little bit different way. I think that we're going to focus on the quality of data from data collection to data analysis and finally data interpretation. And specifically, what we look at is a recent evolution in data collection from traditionally collecting it either via the telephone or in mail surveys or perhaps mall intercepts to collecting it via the internet. And in fact, even today, more than half of all data is collected over the internet, but there are lots of problems associated with internet data collection. And we need to focus on reduction in error in data collection, reduction in problems in getting people to respond. We need to find a way to improve the selection of samples. We're almost at the point where, we don't even have, quote, random samples. And it doesn't mean that we can't have random samples, but the data collection and analysis and quality of data field has changed so rapidly that we need new techniques and new approaches to focus on and facilitate the collection of quality of data. And so I think that's one area, is the quality of data, the reduction of error, the improvement in the methods of analysis, and the improvement in the interpretation of it. But there are also other specific areas that can help us in the sampling area, such as bootstrapping. So as I reflect on it, realistically speaking, it's the entire area of improving the quality of data that we use in our empirical research, and not only in the quantitative side, which is my area of interest and specialization, but on the qualitative side, because in the U.S., researchers have focused almost entirely as well in the last 20 or 30 years on empirical studies that utilize quantitative approaches, and I think I won't say we've ignored the qualitative side, but we haven't devoted as much time and attention to qualitative research and theoretical research as we really need to. So those are some thoughts on the direction that I believe research is going to be moving in the next few years.
Joe, thanks for your insights on areas of research for the future, but what would you recommend to new faculty in terms of how they can be successful?
Well, I mentioned this briefly, but I want to re-emphasize it. I think it's really important to get a good life, career, personal, family balance. It's just really, really important in maintaining your productivity and continuing to be motivated. And there's a phrase that I've always told my graduate students, and I've also tried to follow it myself, but I've always told them, when you work real hard, and when you play real hard, and you try not to mix the two, although sometimes you do have the opportunity, and so it's all right to slip a little bit, but the life-work balance and working hard and playing hard, because they balance each other out so that when you work, you can stay motivated and you can really focus on getting things done. And speaking on focusing on getting things done, one of the things that people often share with you is that you really would like to have big blocks of time to set aside so that you can complete something. And I really still believe that's important, but I think that there is another offsetting rule that people should think of. I think that I've learned that even if I have maybe only 5 minutes or 10 minutes that I can get something done. And to me, that's been very useful in my textbook writing, because if I go into my office and I take 10 minutes and I'm really focused, and if I only write 5 sentences and that's a paragraph, then that's just one less paragraph that I have to write the next time that I come back. So time management and recognizing that don't always use the excuse that you need big blocks of time to be productive, because very often, 6 10-minute sessions is the equivalent of a single hour. And if we're always focusing on, I need an hour or 2 hours or 4 hours, then it's easy to say, well, I don't have it, and you don't get things done. So think about your time management. Another thing that you should think about is finding good co-authors. I think that you can identify co-authors in your doctoral program, but some of those people will, drop out, no longer be interested. And so you need to continuously be trying to identify colleagues that would have an interest in, or perhaps even a passion for, some of the things that you do. And in selecting good co-authors, it's not only about the interest or common interest that you have in time or in topics. It's about completing things on time and about actually carrying their workload, because I can tell you that a number of people that I've started to work with, and they're supposed to write their article or to help you to prepare a module for teaching, either they don't do it, or if they do it, they do it in a sloppy manner. So when you select co-authors, even though you believe that they're good, or even though that they're your friends, I think what you need to do is to make sure that they contribute and continue to contribute their share of the workload, because you can't do everybody else's workload and still have the time for yourself, both on the personal and on the career side. And one other thing that I want to say is, don't be afraid to drop a co-author. Co-authors are helpful, and it's good to have good ones, but if they're no longer contributing, then, politely find someone else to work with, and just stop carrying them if they're not, carrying themselves and contributing what they should be contributing. And then finally, the last thing that I'd like to share as an insight is that very often we think about publish, publish, publish. And publishing is fun, and it's interesting, and it's rewarding, and it boosts your ego when someone sees your article and says, oh, I was really impressed, or I found it interesting. But I want to say to the young people, don't forget about your teaching, because there are equally rewarding aspects of an academic profession in teaching. And so don't forget about it. Try to devote as much time to your preparation as you can. And if you have notes that need to be updated, then update them. And if you've taught the course 20 times, I'll bet you that the 20th time you learned something that you should put in the 21st one. So continuously be asking how you can be a better teacher. And of course, one of the ways to be a better teacher is to listen to the questions that your students ask. And then also, don't be afraid to ask them, what did you understand? And clearly communicate to them that they need to be honest and forthright and open with you if there are things they didn't understand or that they felt like you could explain better, because that's the only way that we can learn the areas that we need to improve. So a final thing is, don't forget your teaching. It can be a lot of pleasure, and of course, the people that you teach will learn better and learn more and be able to continue the tradition of mentoring and working with students.
Okay, Joe, that was great insights, but if we ask you to sum up your career success in a few statements, and I think in your case it's going to take more than a few statements, what would you say?
Well, I've done a lot of things in my life and enjoyed a lot of success. But if I had to choose one contribution, I would say that contribution is the writing of my first textbook, multivariate data analysis, which I did early in my career when I was fairly naive. And I did it in spite of the fact that people told me not to do it. And so I've really been sort of entrepreneurial, and I also often said, well, if you're passionate about something, then you need to just go ahead and do it. And so I decided to write it. And as one example of how naive I was, the objective or the mission in writing the book was to write a book that many students who were not trained in mathematics, including myself, could read and learn. So it was about what are the methods and which ones which methods are appropriate to use in which particular situation, and what software should you use and how do you interpret the data, without requiring students to learn the math or to understand matrix algebra or to solve calculus or simultaneous equations. And so we wrote the book, my co-authors and I, and we wanted to communicate effectively to the market the fact that this was not a mathematically or statistically oriented book, even though it covered those topics. And so in the preface of the book, we put a phrase such as, just as you do not need to be an automobile mechanic to drive a car, you don't need to be a statistician or a mathematician to, in fact, use multivariate data analysis. And of course, this was naive because even though I was in the field of marketing and many of the examples were in marketing, the authors that were going to review the book were from the statistics field and the mathematics field. And so they read the preface, and here I was saying to them, you're no longer needed, and at the same time what I'd like for you to do is to tell everybody what a great book this is. And of course the reviews on the book were only average, or some of them less than favorable about it. But the first edition sold 2,500 or 3,000 copies, which was not bad for a niche field and a field that was just emerging. And then more recent editions have sold as much as 50 to 60,000 copies. And in fact, now with the 7th edition, we have over 17,000 citations according to Google Scholar's latest assessment. So that's my major contribution, at least I feel it's my major contribution to not just the marketing discipline, but the business and the social science disciplines in general.
Joe, what motivated you, or why did you decide to write that multivariate book? What were the things that caused you to get into this area that has been so successful for you?
Well, the truth is, sometimes I reflect back and say, why did I write it? But I'm really happy that I did. But it's really a good example of how timing and luck is so much of an influence in the things that you do in life and the successes that you enjoy. Because just as I didn't start out to be a PhD in marketing or even a professor, I clearly didn't start out to be known for being the author of, the lead author of what has become the most successful multivariate data analysis book. I don't know what the benchmark should be, but Prentice Hall tells me that it has about an 85% market share. And some people even say, when I tell them that, they say, well, what are the other books? Because they don't know any. So I'm sometimes amazed that I decided to write it. But at that particular point in time, I was at the University of Florida, and we had 6 people who were ABD had just finished their comps successfully, and we were looking for dissertation topics because we did what many people did. We ignored our professors saying find a topic and write several papers and build upon that. And so at that time, Florida had recently undergone a review by an accreditation team, and they commented on the fact that that the program at the University of Florida was too vocational. And so they hired some new professors. That's how they decided to strengthen and make the program more research oriented. And so just about that time, they hired 3 young professors who were bright professors. One was Rob Settle, who had a degree from UCLA, and he was a psychologist, and so he brought interesting insights in from that area. He also was a methods person, but he didn't know what the 4 Ps were. And of course, we studied the 4 Ps for many years, and we knew them backwards and forwards, and had memorized them and used them in a lot of different situations. But a second person that they hired was Zero Lambert, and Zero was a hotshot researcher out of Wharton. And of course, graduates of Wharton also knew where the discipline was moving. And then I honestly don't remember the third individual that they hired, but as I recall, he was out of Northwestern and had probably studied from Phil Kotler. But they hired these young people, and they came in to the program, to all 6 of us who were ready to just find a topic for the dissertation and write it and get our degrees and move on. And what they said, particularly Rob Settle said, was if you want to graduate from this program, your dissertation must use multivariate data analysis. Well, I mean, we couldn't even spell that word, much less use these methods, and we'd never taken any courses. And in fact, in my particular situation, I only had 1 statistics course in my entire college career, and it was a basic probability course, and I made a C in it, and I was so happy to get out of it with a C. So I was certainly the most unlikely of an individual to eventually write the multivariate data analysis book. So we went about studying it, and I did in fact finish my doctorate in a year, and then I moved on. But part of writing the doctoral dissertation was that since the chair of my dissertation, who was not Rob Settle, couldn't spell multivariate and didn't know what it was either, he told me that I needed to include sections in the dissertation that, in words, not formulas, described to people what the different techniques were. And so that was one of the first chances, or first times, that I sat down and attempted to describe and to write up these methods in a way that a non-mathematical or non-statistical individual could really read and understand. And then I got out, and I continued to say, the books that we had to read were really full of the math, and I said, someone needs to write a book that can, teach people these new and interesting and valuable techniques who are not experts in mathematics. And within a year or so, that someone became me. And I said, I think I'll write a book, which was sort of strange because I was told by my chair not to do it, and my colleagues saying, well, you need to write journal articles because that's where the reward system was. But I really had a passion for it, and so I began writing it and learning that was not the easiest thing. But about that time also, a good friend and colleague of mine from the University of Texas at Austin, Bob Peterson, he and Mark Alpert, who were also contemporaries, or actually a couple years ahead of time, published an article in the JMR on canonical correlation analysis, which was a new and emerging technique. And much of their philosophy and approach was to write it in a simple way. And that helped me also to be motivated and continue to learn about how we could write all the techniques. And so we wrote the book. Actually, I wrote the first 5 or 6 chapters. And at that point, I realized that I really did need to write some more journal articles. And so I called on my colleague, Rolf Anderson, who was in the doctoral program with me. And Rolf wrote the chapter on MANOVA. And we worked together to write the intro. And I had written several of the other ones. And then we needed someone to write the regression chapter. And so I talked to a colleague of mine and was introduced to Ron Tatham. And so it was Hare, Anderson, and Tatham. And that's how we ended up with the original HATCO database for Hare, Anderson, and Tatham that became a core aspect of that book, which was a single database throughout, so that when students were learning the methods, that they didn't have to relearn a case study, that they could focus on working with a single case study throughout the book. And so that's really how I wrote the book. The philosophy was that first started out that we would have no formulas in it, but we ended up with a single formula, and that single formula approach lasted through the first 4 editions, when it became necessary to add structural equations modeling. And of course, when you have structural equations modeling, then we had to add a few more equations to it. But we continued to emphasize the importance of a book that teaches people what the methods are, how to use them, when to use them, and what to do with the numbers once you got the solutions. And so it's really been a fun and an interesting journey for an individual that benefited from some changes that we weren't really excited about at the end of our doctoral programs, but in fact changed our life and changed my career. And in fact, it's been independently validated in a number of ways, but I remember, in fact, all the marketing scholars remember an individual who contributed a lot to the field, and that was Gil Churchill in methods. And I ran into Gil one time, and he actually told me, he said, you know, that really made a difference in your career. And of course, what also made a difference in my career is untold numbers of doctoral students that I have met over the years at conferences, and they come up to me and they say one simple phrase, and it's really a simple phrase that has been very consistent over the years, and they say, I could not have passed my comps if I had not have had your book. And back to the Gil Churchill thing, I remember again that he told me that the quant people at the University of Wisconsin, where he was teaching, felt like that the multivariate book was not rigorous enough for their students, and so they would not in the early years adopt it as their official textbook for the course. But what Gil did and Ford told their students again that you need to study the Hare, Anderson, Tatham, and later Bill Black, and more recently Barry Babin. You need to study that book because that's where you can really learn the techniques and how to use them.
Incredible story. As we're wrapping up here, you also have contributed to other textbooks. Any comments concerning sales, the principles of marketing, and other textbooks that you've worked on?
Well, as I said, the multivariate textbook was my first one, but I enjoyed writing, not just writing journal articles, but I enjoyed writing textbooks. And so it wasn't too long after the first edition of the multivariate book was published, which was, a task in itself, because I was an unknown author from a not so prestigious University of Mississippi that was known more for Miss Americas than it was for scholars writing books. And it took me about 5 years to actually get that published. But I used that book to leverage the publication and to get a contract on a sales management book. And then later on, I used that to move into writing a Principles of Marketing book. And that Principles of Marketing book is now in its 11th edition, and I hope we'll have the 12th and the 13th and the 14th. But along the way, I also wrote a couple of business research books, a couple of marketing research books, and all of those books are the Sales Management in the 5th edition, the Marketing Research in the 4th edition, and the Business Research in the 3rd edition. So textbook writing has been a major element of the things that I've decided to do. And of course, that is an ego trip in the sense that you teach courses that you use your own textbooks in, but above and beyond that, it's also rewarding in the sense that you learn from your students and you help them to learn by writing textbooks. And it's just been an incredible learning experience and journey to have had the opportunity to write those books and to work with students to teach and to learn.
Joe, we really appreciate you sharing all of your wisdom, insights, and your accomplishments are amazing, and it's been a lot of fun to be your close friend and colleague for so many years. And once again, I hope we both will be going forward for many more fun years and lots of contributions. So thanks.
Thank you, OC. It certainly has been a pleasure on my behalf as well.